All right, you ready for this? We're going back to the Poopoo Peepee document for the 5th time.
Really?
Seriously. You know, I never thought we'd be here again.
Yeah.
But our listeners, they're not letting this one go. We've got a new analysis to unpack, and this time it's meta.
Meta.
Yeah. Someone made a YouTube video analyzing another analysis video about this thing. It's a whole rabbit hole.
Wow, that's layers.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I've lost track of what the original document even said at this point.
Honestly, I think that's part of what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
How so?
Well, it's like the content of the original document almost doesn't even matter anymore. It's become this kind of blank canvas for us to project our own interpretations and meanings onto.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this meta video, it hits on some familiar themes,
Hmm.
right? Lost languages, secret codes.
Hmm.
Maybe it's like some ancient mantra or even a lullaby. We're even seeing that mental palate cleanser idea pop up again.
Right. Those seem to be the common threads that run through a lot of the analysis.
Yeah.
And they really speak to our deep-seated desire to find patterns and meaning, even in the absence of, like, concrete evidence.
So it's not about the document itself,
It's about us.
but about what we want to see in it.
Exactly. It's like, I think the video used this example. You hear rustling leaves and immediately assume it's a predator.
That makes sense from a survival perspective, right?
Exactly. It's a survival mechanism.
Yeah,
But it can also lead us down some pretty crazy rabbit holes.
that's true. But this meta video, it seems to be doing something different.
Yeah.
It's not just rehashing those same arguments. It's leaning heavily on humor.
You're right. There's a real playfulness to it
Yeah.
that I think is really important, because every time we think we've exhausted all the possibilities with this document, a new layer of analysis emerges, and
Yeah.
each layer reveals something new about how we approach information, not necessarily about the document itself.
Okay, I'm following you. So what's so significant about the humor then? I mean, it was funny. All the over-the-top sound effects,
Yeah.
the dramatic zooms, but I'm not sure I get the deeper connection.
Well, think about it this way. By using humor, especially this kind of exaggerated, almost absurd humor, the video's inviting us to kind of question the seriousness of the whole analytical process.
Okay.
It's like it's saying, hey, maybe we're all getting a little carried away here.
So it's poking fun at itself,
Yeah,
and maybe at all of us who are like obsessed with deciphering this thing.
exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting, because it reminds me of the data art movement, specifically Duchamp's fountain.
Oh, the urinal he presented as a sculpture.
That's the one.
Yeah, I remember that. It was pretty controversial.
Extremely, but that was the point, right?
Right.
Both Fountain and this meta video, they challenge our assumptions about what we consider meaningful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What we consider worthy of analysis.
They're making us think about what we value.
Yeah, and they're forcing us to confront this idea that meaning isn't inherent in an object or a text.
Okay.
It's something we create through our interpretations.
So the meaning's not in the document itself. It's in how we look at it.
Exactly.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this. So the meta video is using humor to kind of highlight the inherent subjectivity of meaning. Like, hey, we can analyze this document until we're blue in the face, but ultimately the meaning we find is just a reflection of our own biases and perspectives.
You got it. And the brilliant thing is, it's doing all of this through humor, which makes it accessible and engaging, even if the underlying concepts are kind of complex.
That's true. It makes you think, but it doesn't feel like a lecture.
Right. It doesn't take itself too seriously.
This is blowing my mind a little. So even though this is like the 5th time we're circling back to this Poopoo Peepee document, you're saying there's still something new to uncover.
I think so.
Not about the document itself, but about how we approach analysis and meaning making.
Precisely. This document, with all its iterations of analysis, it's like a case study in, it's called apophenia.
Apophenia.
Yeah, it's the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random or meaningless data.
Okay, that's new.
It's like seeing faces in clouds or hearing hidden messages in songs played backward.
Ah, I get it.
Yeah.
So you're saying that this deep dive, even though it's about something as ridiculous as the Poopoo Peepee document,
Right.
can actually teach us something valuable about how our brains work.
Absolutely. It's a reminder to be aware of our own biases and to
Right.
approach information with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Oh.
Even when it seems like everyone else is seeing something we're not. Like, it's like that example the video used, hearing rustling leaves and assuming it's a predator. That's apophenia right there.
Yeah.
Our brains are just wired to find patterns and make connections, even if those connections aren't really there.
It makes sense, though, from an evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah.
Like you said, survival instinct, right?
Absolutely. But instead of a tiger in the bushes, we've got hidden messages in the Poopoo Peepee document.
Right. Okay, so that makes sense.
Huh.
But how do we l- like bring this back down to earth? What is all of this apophenia, this meaning-making stuff? What does it mean for the average person listening? How do they apply these like abstract ideas to their own lives?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways here is this. We need to be aware of our own biases. We all have preconceived notions and beliefs that shape the way we see the world.
Right.
And those biases can definitely influence how we interpret information,
Okay.
especially when we're dealing with something as ambiguous as, the Poopoo Peepee document.
So you're saying even if we think we're being objective, we're bringing our own baggage to the table.
Absolutely. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of. It's like
Right.
the next time you're reading a news article or watching a documentary, just ask yourself, what am I bringing to this?
Mm.
What are my assumptions? And how might those assumptions be, like coloring my interpretation?
That's a great point. It's like we're all wearing these invisible glasses that filter the information we receive.
Exactly.
And sometimes, those glasses can distort our view of reality.
And that's where I think the humor of the meta video comes in.
How so?
Well, by using absurdity, it's encouraging us to take off those glasses just for a moment and look at things from a fresh perspective.
I'm starting to see how powerful humor can be.
Yeah.
It's not just about making us laugh.
Right.
It's about making us think differently.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key takeaway from this deep dive.
Okay.
The importance of embracing a more playful, more flexible way of thinking, being open to multiple interpretations, even if they seem contradictory or absurd.
But it's okay to not have all the answers.
Yeah.
To say, I don't know, or maybe there's more to this than meets the eye.
Absolutely. In fact, embracing that uncertainty can lead to some really fascinating discoveries.
Why?
Well, think about it. If everyone had agreed on that first interpretation of the Poopoo Peepee document, we wouldn't be here having this conversation,
That's true.
exploring these complex ideas about meaning and interpretation.
They probably would have gotten bored and moved on by now.
Right. So, you know, embracing ambiguity, embracing uncertainty, it can actually be more enriching than just clinging to a single fixed interpretation.
So the more questions we ask,
Exactly.
the more possibilities we open up.
The more possibilities we open up. And that can lead to a much deeper, more nuanced understanding of the world around us.
This is really making me rethink my whole approach to learning.
Yeah.
I've always been so focused on finding the right answer,
Right?
but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the real journey is in the exploration itself.
I think you're onto something. And that's what's so brilliant about this whole Poopoo Peepee saga.
Okay.
It started with something seemingly meaningless, but it sparked all these really interesting conversations about how we think, how we interpret information, how we create meaning.
So the document itself is just a catalyst.
Exactly.
The real treasure is in the intellectual journey it takes us on.
You got it. And that journey isn't just about abstract concepts. It has real-world applications.
Like what?
Think about the field of science, for instance. Scientists are constantly reinterpreting data based on new discoveries or just changing perspectives.
So even in science, there's no such thing as absolute truth.
I mean, there are certain fundamental laws of nature that are pretty well established, but even those laws are subject to refinement as our understanding of the universe evolves. And then you have fields like medicine or psychology, where there's a lot more room for interpretation and debate.
So it's like we're all constantly revising our understanding of the world based on new information, new ways of looking at things.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be open to different perspectives
Yeah.
and to be willing to challenge our own assumptions. Just because something seems settled or certain, it doesn't mean it actually is.
This is all starting to connect back to that meta video.
How so?
It's like the video is encouraging us to be more critical thinkers, to question everything,
Right.
to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
You got it. And that's a powerful message, especially in a world where we're just constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
It's like we need to be our own fact checkers, our own meta analysts.
Absolutely.
You need to be able to step back and say, okay, what are the biases here?
Right.
What are the alternative interpretations? And what does this all mean for me?
Precisely. And that's a skill that's becoming increasingly important in the digital age. We can't just passively consume information.
Right.
We need to be actively engaged, questioning, evaluating everything we encounter.
So what you're saying is, even though this whole Poopee deep dive started as a bit of a joke,
Yeah,
it's actually led us to some pretty profound
I
insights
think so.
about how to navigate, like, the complexities of the information age.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's like we've taken this absurd document and turned it into a springboard for exploring really important ideas
Yeah.
about critical thinking, bias, the nature of meaning itself.
This has been an incredible journey. I feel like I've learned so much, not
Hmm.
just about the Poopee Peepee document, but about myself
Mm.
and how I approach the world.
That's the beauty of these deep dives. You never know where they're going to take you.
And sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most valuable discoveries. But I think we've, taken this about as far as we can go for now.
Yeah,
We've peeled back the layers, explored the meta, and I think maybe even gleaned a few nuggets of wisdom along the way.
I couldn't agree more. It's time to let this particular rabbit hole rest for a while.
Before we wrap up though, I want to make sure our listener that they walk away with something concrete.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about like all these abstract ideas, apophenia,
Yeah.
subjectivity of meaning,
Yeah.
but how can they actually apply this to their own lives?
That's a great point. Let's bring it back down to earth for a second. Think about it this way. We encounter these poo-poo pee-pee moments all the time, even if they don't actually involve like a cryptic document.
Poopy peepee moments.
I like that. So you mean like situations where we're trying to make sense of something
Yeah.
and it's not clear, it's ambiguous, and
Yeah.
our brains are working, they're like in overdrive trying to find patterns
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and create meaning where there might not be any.
Yeah, it could be anything, like a confusing news story or a piece of abstract art,
Hmm.
or even like a disagreement with a friend where you're both interpreting the same event in totally different ways.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So how do we avoid falling into that apophenia trap in those everyday situations?
Well, that's where I think those key takeaways come in.
Okay.
First, remember that bias is always at play. We all have our unique perspectives, our own experiences that shape how we see the world.
So the first step is acknowledging that. Like, okay, I'm coming to this with my own set of assumptions. What are those assumptions? How might they be influencing my interpretation?
It's like before you even start analyzing the situation, you have to analyze yourself.
Exactly. It's about being self-aware, recognizing that our interpretations aren't always objective truth.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about that second takeaway? Embracing a more playful and flexible way of thinking.
Hmm.
How does that help us deal with these real life poopy pee moments?
It's about being open to the possibility that there might be multiple valid interpretations.
Okay.
You know, it's about being willing to step outside of your own perspective, consider other points of view, asking what if, instead of just clinging to like a single fixed interpretation.
So instead of like getting stuck in this loop of trying to force a single meaning onto something,
Right.
maybe the best approach is to like embrace the ambiguity, the uncertainty, even the
Yeah.
humor of it all.
Precisely. Sometimes the most meaningful discoveries come from letting go of our rigid assumptions and allowing ourselves to see things in a new light.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
It has been fun.
Who knew that something as seemingly nonsensical as the Poopoo PP document, that it could lead us to like such profound insights about how we think and how we make sense of the world.
It's a testament to the power of curiosity and the importance of never stopping, asking questions, even when the answers seem elusive or absurd.
To our listener out there, the next time you find yourself facing one of those real-life poo-poo pee-pee moments, remember what we've talked about today.
Acknowledge your biases.
Embrace those multiple perspectives,
And don't be afraid to find the humor in the absurdity of it all.
because sometimes the most meaningful discoveries are the ones that make us laugh and think differently and question everything we thought we knew. Stay curious out there, everyone.